family, and welcome to another episode of Underground Railroad Radio. This is your host, Brother Rich. I'm in the building with Minister Jew, the Imagination Guru. What's happening, brother?
What's going on, Rich? How you doing?
Oh, I'm good, brother. I'm good. I had a great conversation with you earlier, and I was talking to Jew, and I was saying, I want to kind of him to touch on this on my radio for a little while, just to let the people know a different quantum perspective on how entertainment affects the neural pathways in our brain and affects our subconscious mind. We look at movies and we look at sitcoms and reality show, and we don't understand the effect that it has on programming, our minds or whatever. But you had an interesting take on this Spike Lee, the Chiraq trailer that you've seen. And I'm just, before I get into anything, I just want you to get into it, brother. Just tell the people what you was telling me earlier. I thought it was quite interesting. So go ahead, Minister Jew.
Oh, man, this is a wonderful topic. It should really shed some light on the situation and really shift people's perception of how to view things from a more loftier place, have a higher view from what the mainstream or what our initial emotional response to something is without really combing it through. So first, I'm in Chicago, man, born and raised, right? 34 years been in this city. And so I know the pulse of the city, man, west side of Chicago, Chicago Avenue, L-Town, K-Town, Madison, in the Austin community, man. So I know what it's like to be on the streets of Chicago. And so, I hear the rumblings, right? But I think it's best for somebody here to give a dialogue from a more, shall we say, uplifting perspective, more so than a judgmental one for what this movie can do and what it can project into the psyche, into the consciousness of not only the people who are in Chicago, but the people who are viewing Chicago outside of the city, the country, these other cities, the worldview on this city to impact change. So we get right into it, right? Spike Lee make this movie, and it's a satire, right? Which some people would confuse with a comedy because of some of the theatrics involved in it. It's not really like a documentary. It doesn't feel like it's telling an exact story of what's going on in quote-unquote real time and real circumstances by way of people's perception of what they view Chicago as and the violence that's happening here. So a lot of people got upset about that. Rhyme Fest from Chicago, a couple other artists here. I forget some of these guys' names, but a lot of these artists here from Chicago have been making their voices felt and heard and being in opposition to what Spike Lee has presented to the masses. But we have to look at what is a satire. A satire deals with ridicule, shaming, these different vices in order to push what is being presented into another direction or to push it into improvement, to place ridicule, to place vice, to place shame, right, by way of sideways comedy in order to prove a point. This is a very, very, very old piece of work, satire, piece of literature that Spike Lee has put together. And see, when we study satire, we see that it was created to challenge a term called the social imaginary. Now, Rich just told you my other handle is the Imagination Guru, and we'll get into that later because this becomes very important. This is an actual term called the social imaginary, where it's a set of values, opinions, symbols, beliefs, all these different things that actually shape a group of people's worldview, right? Or a whole social view that these group of people are viewing the world out of based upon their values, right? Or their opinions of how they see different scenarios in the world. And a good example of this would be Christianity and Islam, right? A lot of people look at those two and say those two things will never be able to coexist, right? You got some people who are gun-ho Christians, you got some people who are gun-ho Muslims, and they say We're not going to mix with that. That's not our thing. We don't see these two being able to intermingle, right? And so they created this social imaginary based upon these concepts that have been invaded into their psyche. But yet we can see somebody like a Farrakhan or other leaders who are able to use and be diverse using these two different mediums of religion, right? And be able to pull it off exquisitely, especially in Farrakhan's cases, dealing with the verbiage, the way that he communicates it to people as an orator. So we know that that's not necessarily a reality, that Christianity and Islam cannot coexist. However, the social imaginary of the people who are in these particular religions, right, this is what they have programmed and brainwashed themselves with, and so it does become a reality to them. And so then you have people go out, commit murders against Muslims or commit hate crimes against Christians, et cetera, because they have built up this social imaginary in their mind that these two things cannot exist, right? So what Spike has done is, with this movie, he's challenging the social imaginary and the concepts surrounding Chicago, right? And he's done it by what they call, this is a law that they call the law of association, where you start to infuse these different concepts into the mind, these different ideas into the mind in order to shift old thought patterns or completely eradicate old thought patterns with a new programming, a new concept, a new idea. So you see somebody like Nick Cannon in the movie playing a gangster role, and you see Samuel L. Jackson playing the role that he's playing in the trailer, right? It's throwing you off. You're like, Nick Cannon, because you know Nick Cannon in quote-unquote real life, right? And this is where the veil becomes very thin when you get into the art of film, when you start to get into the spirit of film. The veil that separates what we consider real and unreal becomes invisible, and then the lines become blurred. This is the beauty of art. This is why they say art mimics life and vice versa, because it is something about this Neptunian thing with art and film that blurs the line, that causes other realities to pop up and become manifest. So what Spike is doing with these characters that we see is he's challenging the concept of the people, not only in Chicago, but the people in the world who are viewing Chicago and the interactions that happen on a day-to-day basis here. He's creating a new fabric, a new texture for you to view this out of, and it causes problems in people's already established mind. This is what the law of association does. It tends to challenge people's old thought patterns, right? And sometimes people can be so consistent with their old thought patterns when new ideas are being implemented in order to change the perception and the psyche of the person involved that you'll rebel against it. You'll fight against it. Some people even go insane trying to fight against these new ideas and concepts being implemented because of the old thought that they've been had or having. So the gang violence, right, and the murder and the guns and et cetera that's going on here in Chicago has been talked about so much, Rich, right, that what happens is in your brain, right, it got something called brain signs or brain signals. It's one of those two terms where you can talk about something, right? Example, you want a new house, right, Rich? And and you go tell a friend about all the plans that you have to get this new house, right? And then your friend congratulates you on the idea, telling you, hey, that's a great idea, right? Over and over and over again. The mind works in a way where if you consistently hear that appreciation or that acceptance of the idea that you're verbally communicating to somebody, right, then the mind starts to feel like it already accomplished it. And then you start to become lackluster in the actual effort that it actually takes to get the physical house. So I'm using that as an example to show people we've been talking about the gun violence, etc., so much in Chicago, right, that it has become a repetitive dialogue, and people are not really interested in stopping the violence, right? It's become just a dialogue. We love to talk about it. It's become an attractive conversation, right? But now here comes Spike with a totally different angle on how to approach it with some of the concepts and the imagery that he's projecting in order to challenge your social imaginary, right? You don't like it. So now you got Rhyme Fest coming out at him. All these other people coming at him, attacking him, right? Because that consistent dialogue that they've been having about Chicago has now been hit with another piece of imagery called Chiraq, right? And so it becomes important to understand the history of satire, because we'll see that this is actually a quantum phenomenon that's happening, because satire is known to produce prophetic things, right? It's known to produce prophetic outcomes, right? I give you an example. Benjamin Franklin in 1784 wrote a comedic letter, right, called An Economical Project, where he wrote to the people in Paris in a satire, right, that they need to wake up earlier in the morning to capture more sunlight, right, versus burning all the candles that they were burning. But he did it in a satirical way, in a comedic way, right? Now, this is 1784. Daylight saving time didn't come into existence in 1907. You see? So what happens is we don't understand how powerful our minds are, right? And this is where it takes a high priest, right, or somebody who understands these concepts to be able to relate it to the layman, to the uninitiated who hasn't decided to walk down the path of the unseen, and be able to see how these things actually manifest in the physical world from thought alone. So before you go judging the satire called Chiraq, you have to understand the psychological imprints that are being embedded in everybody who's going to walk into the movie theater's minds to produce another external image, i.e., gun violence going down, murder rate going down in Chicago, because of the imagery that Spike Lee has chosen to project into your psyche to get you to see it in a different light. Another prophetic film, a satire, was something called the Americathon in 1979. In this film, they wrote about the fall of the Soviet Union, presidential sex scandals, and the popularity in reality TV shows. Now, this is 1979 in a satire. But then we see what happens from that satire, the fall of the Soviet Union, Bill Clinton, all these reality TV shows have run rampant. So we have to understand the science. And if you don't, that's why you're here, to listen to us on these platforms, explain it to you so that now you can have a different outlook on what you're perceiving, right? You can step into a new avenue of learning. You can grow new neural pathways in your brain to get answers where before you kept running into a brick wall because all you have been presented with is the same information repetitively over and over again, and there's been nothing new introduced into your psyche to produce new phenomena, right? So, so then in the Chiraq joint, right? They've got this thing going on where he's got the young ladies going on a sex strike, right? We've seen this in the trailer, right, Rick? Mm-hmm. And, you know, a lot of people upset at that. Some people saying it's, you know, it's a feminist thing, and why would he use that? Telling a woman to do with her body, all these type of things, right? Right? And I understand that because we're in an age where women are being projected to the forefront, and rightfully so, because we're all part of the human family, so everybody should be treated equal, right? But let's get into the science of the matter, right? Let's take it out of the realm of the feeling and let's get into the science so we can add the appropriate emotion to what we're actually viewing or what Spike Lee is externalizing here through this imagery called sex strikes in the movie. Anybody that knows myself, Noble, and Pooh, they know we deal with the galactic science, right? We deal with stars, planets, etc., right? Dealing with human consciousness, dealing with the imagination, a plethora of things that we deal with on a regular basis to try to elevate people's consciousness. Well, about 2 years ago, I was doing a study, Rich, on, I became very intrigued about a marker in astrology called an exaltation, which is where a planet does extremely well in a specific zodiac sign. And in this particular case, I was looking at Venus, right, the planet of love, the planet that indicates the feminine energy, the planet that denotes what you appreciate, what you value, your comforts in life, right, monetary gain, etc. I was looking at why would this planet be exalted in the sign of Pisces, or what we consider the 12th house in astrology. And so when I was looking at this, you know, I started to look for things that correspond in our everyday awareness to be able to get insight to some of these spiritual things, right? Because we can look at the pattern, right? Like when you get into these holy texts and these scriptures and they keep talking about the pattern above versus the pattern below. You can look to the pattern below in order to understand what the pattern above has manifested in the microcosm. So I started to look at the energy of the 12th house. What does it consist of? Confinement, lockup, right? And I said, wow, why would the Venetian principle, this feminine aspect, right, why would it be exalted in such a region of space? So then I started to get into my studies, and I came across something very interesting, Rich. I came across some information that was dealing with the incarceration rate, because we're dealing with incarceration and lockup with this 12th house Piscean energy. And so I started looking, and I noticed two things. It said 96% of men who go to jail all have two things in common, Rich. One is they're not in a committed relationship, right? A strong committed relationship, preferably marriage. Mm-hmm. And the other one was they're all heathens, meaning they've never practiced any form of religiosity, any form of spirituality. They're just, you know, rebels, right? And I said, wow, that's interesting. Then I started to look back at this Venetian principle, and that's when it dawned on me. I said, this energy is trying to indicate to us here in the microcosm that when we have the feminine energy in our presence, on our side, bonded together in union, this keeps us away from the troubles that ensue, i.e. jail, i.e. lock up, which is the Piscean 12th house thing. Now, how do you see this play out in this reality? When a man goes to jail, right, because remember, we're dealing with heathens, and we're dealing with men who are not in a committed relationship. First thing they go do, Rich, is they go get inside of some type of holy book, don't they, Rich?
Yeah.
They run to a Bible or Quran.
Yeah.
Then the next thing they find themselves doing is what? Trying to get the woman on the outside who they've been flirting with in a relationship, not really being committed. Now they telling the woman, I want to marry you. Would you marry me? Why they locked up, Rich? See, they got the lesson backwards. They realized the value in that energy after they had to learn the harsh lesson because nobody was there to tell them how these energies actually play out. So the woman in our lives is like a physical talisman of protection on a spiritual level.
Some deep stuff.
You see?
Yeah.
So now, here we have Spike Lee in the movie saying we need the women to keep the goodies away from these young cats out here toting these pistols, right? Mm-hmm. And brothers, let's just keep it real. We know how it is. When honey don't want to get that thing up, that's like the worst thing in the world, right? We be like, huh? What? You know? You start scratching and, he's like, what's going on? Right? So we know the power that she has, right? When she steps into understanding that power, which she should know, she can utilize that as a means to keep her man and these young black men out of trouble and alive and out of jail. Especially in this country, because it's a country that's dealing with laws. You just can't take the sweet spot. You can't take it. You go to jail for that. Right? Mm-hmm. So when we look at the history of it, because I want to show you how effective this is for people who don't know that they're projecting that imagery into the minds of the young women. And they should take on that responsibility, right? When they see that, in order to compel these young men to change the dynamic in their behavior. And then we have to give the young man an alternative, or the young men an alternative, to find out who they really are. What are their talents? What are their gifts? This is what we do over at Hip Hop Astrology TV on YouTube. Go check us out. Go to hiphopastrology.com. Check us out. This is for the youth, so that we can point them in the proper direction to understand where some of your gifts are, instead of you having to do all this guesswork, right? And then you trying to fit in with the crowd because everybody else is, wearing their pants all the way off their behind, right? Toting guns, doing et cetera, show you that, no, look, man, you got specific energies that denote you can be well and do well at this. How about applying your talents to here? But nobody's telling them that. They're going through a school system that is not necessarily telling them where their talents are. They're educating them or infusing in them with the teachings that they want to give them on how to go get a good job for somebody else. But when you understand who you are internally, the I am, right, part of your psyche and consciousness, then you can facilitate brilliance down here. But getting back to the women holding out, they had something in Colombia, right, in a town called Barbacos in Colombia, right, where the women down there issued something called the cross-leg strike, Rich. They were petitioning for the construction of a road to be built that would take them into the capital, which was about 35 miles away. But walking, they said this thing took them 8-10 hours to go there and back, right? And so they went on a cross-leg strike and one giving up the thing to their men. This put so much pressure on the government that they agreed to have the road built, Rich.
And where was this at again?
This is in Colombia, in a town called Barbacos. Google it. Barbacos, Colombia. The cross-leg strike. It'll pop up. You'll see it.
Mm-hmm.
Another one was in Pereira, Colombia. This is back in around 2006. Mass murder going on. Over 500 plus people killed, right? The women went on another sex strike. Lo and behold, some time went past. The women weren't giving their thing up. The murder rate dropped by 26.5%, Rich.
Yeah.
So the women should embrace that. Don't get too caught up in this, this. It got to be like this or it got to be like that, and they disrespecting this. No. If the issue is to make sure that, go ahead, Rich.
But you see, the first thing that will pop up, speaking like that, Minister Jew, women would feel like, all right, we hear constantly about the power of pussy, the power of the vagina power, this, that, pussy power, all these phrases or whatever. Now, when you say it like that, a woman might say, well, Minister Jew, that may be true, but by doing that makes it seem as though that's the only thing women have to offer, is the vagina. That's the grand prize, and after that, there's nothing else to offer. You get what I'm saying?
I get it. Here's my response to that, right? Do you want your boyfriend in a casket?
Mm-hmm.
Do you want him in jail? See, we have to really ask ourselves what's the priority, right? Because this is the reality of what's happening. when they did the study, let me just show you this, right? When they did the study to find out what was drawing these men to criminality, it was for status, power, and sexual attraction, Rick.
Say that one more time. Say that one more time.
It was for status, power, and sexual attraction from women, from men who were thought to be pompous, tough, killers, etc. So now you have to weigh it here. If that's where we're going to go in order to stop lives from being taken. Because see, here's the thing: we know that it shouldn't have to go there, right? It shouldn't have to go there, right? These young men, right? They should have an innate something in them to know that this is not appropriate, right? But that's not the case. But they do cling to their female counterpart, right? Mm-hmm. And so we have to be able to use something that's going to negate this type of activity. Otherwise, it's always going to happen, Rich, right? It's always going to happen. You're going to keep dating these same men, young women, and the same thing is going to continue to happen. And you're going to be crying at funerals, right? You're going to be going to county jails and prisons, right? You're going to have babies by these men who won't see these men anymore or won't see them for extended periods of time, right? That's the other side of the ledger versus saying, you know what? I'm going to hold out for 4 or 5 months on you, Jack.
Damn.
To see will that change his psychology.
Mm-hmm.
And not only that, but implement something else into the mix that's going to allow him to grow and flourish as a man, where that doesn't have to become the anecdote forever. But see, we're dealing with a crisis. And when you're dealing with a crisis, you go to desperate measures in order to at least pump the brakes. So I'm saying this can be used to pump the brakes. I'm not saying this has got to be an everlasting thing, but to initiate it, to pump the brakes, to get these young men's perception to change is what I'm saying here. And I'm saying that it does work. Right?
Indeed.
So you know, that's go ahead, Rich. Go ahead.
Well, just in general, with I guess the basic premise from what I'm getting from you and your take on this Spike Lee trailer and dealing with the quantum world is that Spike is essentially trying to introduce a new reality that if we give our attention and energy to, we will see it coalesce into matter. Now, the thing about it is, and what's big in our culture, there's this term called keeping it real. So when you have brothers like Rhymefest or the other brothers from Chicago or just people in general that seen this trailer, the first thing they want or they yearn for is something authentic. And if you make a Greek comedy, something that they completely cannot relate to it, they're going to say, Jew, but I get what you're saying, Jew. This is what we want it to be, but this doesn't feel authentic. So could you explain it, what is keeping it real to you from a quantum perspective? I guess that's what I'm trying to say. Because from a mundane perspective, people feel as though just seeing what happens in their everyday environment, whether it's sex, money, drugs, whatever it be, they want to see more of that because that's what makes them authentic. So what is keeping it real to Minister Jew from a quantum perspective?
Let me tell you something, Rich. People have no idea what reality is. That's the problem. They have no idea. See, Rich, there's something called quantum tunneling, Rich, where, let's say, for instance, you got a photon on one side of the wall, right? And it's a physical wall, Rich, very much physical, drywall, very physical. This photon essentially borrows energy from the other side of the wall in order to pass through that physical object called the wall, Rich. That's a reality. That's how light actually functions. That is some of the properties of how light works, Rich. So when you ask me, or people ask me that want to know that answer, I tell them, reality has no limits. All things that are in reality only once came from something imagined, Rich. So people who are comfortable with the quote-unquote keeping it real, what they're essentially saying is, I'm comfortable with my particle state of mind versus the wave state because I'm more efficient in something that's tangible to my senses, right? I can grasp that better. I can feel that better. But yet, the very thing that you're grasping in your hand came from somebody's imagination at one point. I'm talking about the very first model of that. And they've heard me say this before on this show time and time again, but I want to be repetitive with this so people get it. So these people who are saying, well, it ain't real, right? They are in a state that won't allow them to see any other reality. And this is how powerful this thing is with film. I did a presentation 2 years ago called The Spirit of Film, Theatrical Magic Explained, where, let me show you how real this is, Rich. Let me show you what's real. Let me show you what's really real. In the movie Knowing, Rich, Nicolas Cage, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is like November 2009 this movie came out. So he's sitting in his living room, Rich, and the clock strikes 12. He cuts the television on. The news reporter comes on and says, an oil rig explodes in the Gulf of Mexico, killing such and such and such and such amount of people, right? 6 months later, off the Gulf of Mexico, this was in the movie, this is what it said in the movie, 6 months later, an oil rig exploded in the Gulf of Mexico, Rich, killing the same amount of people that they described in the movie, Rich.
Oh.
The BP oil spill that everybody's familiar with.
Mm-hmm.
So when these gentlemen speak on this, it's okay because they're not priests. They don't understand the higher aspects of mentalism. They don't understand that. They're still dealing in the realm of Malkuth. They want to deal with what I can physically see, but they don't know that the invisible world is what actually manifests the things in the visible world. And I don't know why people have a hard time with it because you're breathing air right now that you can't see, Rich, but it's animating your body. So this is not a far-fetched thing. I'm talking quantum physics, quantum mechanics, quantum consciousness here. These are tests that have been running laboratories for 100 years, man, and the results always come back the same. So they don't understand that what Spike is doing is creating a quantum phenomenon in order to see it play out on the screen of space that we call everyday life, to bring a change and a dynamic to what we see on the streets of Chicago, Inglewood, Alton Community, Garfield Park, etc. Stony, Lakeshore, all of that. Trying to infuse different images because images is what actually facilitates the creation process in man. This is why they tell you in these books that you were made in the image of. Because the image is what facilitates the action. It is the feeling that attracts it, though. So then you have a situation, right, where people are all upset about what Spike Lee's creating, and in the same day he puts the trailer out, a young man, a very young man, but at 9 years old, named Tyshawn Lee, makes the news, national news. Same last name, Lee and Lee, become joined at the hip at the same time, and they actually ran both of those stories congruent on CNN. But when people don't understand quantum phenomenon, they don't look for those type of correspondences in these stories. Because our own energy that we're putting out into the universe speaks back to us in linguistics if we're aware. Primarily in the Western civilization, because we're not right-brain thinkers. We tend to think primarily with left-brain logic, and the language centers are in the left hemisphere of the brain and the temporal lobes. So when the quantum is trying to respond back to you in this physical world, what better way for the light to go off than through linguistics? If you're bright enough to catch it, but most people are dealing with 1-4 vision. They're just mundane. They're not even looking past the organic or what you would call regular story. They're not looking to see where's the spiritual undergirding and what they're experiencing in this reality. So now the feelings and the emotion of the people in Chicago, coupled with what was coming down the pipe with the trailer for Chicago, is producing this type of phenomenon. And Spike Lee, whether he's conscious of it or not, he's become one of the greatest magicians ever to live. But see, he's already incorporated quantum principles in some of his earlier work. Do the right thing. I give you an example. In that movie, Radio Raheem gets choked out by the police, right, Rich?
Yeah.
Now, that was inspired by a real-life choking in New York in 1983 by a man named Michael Stewart. Spike Lee was wind of that story and decided to put it in his movie. That was an intentional scene that Spike Lee put in that movie because of what he understood from what happened to this other gentleman named Michael got choked by the police in 83. So then fast forward last year, Eric Gardner gets choked out by the police in the same manner that Radio Raheem got choked out. Spike Lee puts the video together, posts it on YouTube to show the striking similarities between what was art with Radio Raheem, which initially came from a real-life story with this young man named Michael, and that was translated over back into the physical world off the screen into the situation with Eric Gardner. So he's already playing this delicate tightrope between art and life. And they're superimposing themselves on one another to create similar phenomena, whether it be in the artistic work or a man standing on the corner with cigarettes getting choked out by the police. But then when you really step into the spiritual awareness of what these energies represent, you'll see what's really trying to be communicated to the people down here, that it is time for us to awaken. And that there's forces inside of us that are ready to come online to deal with a lot of the issues that we think we have to deal with in a physical sense. Although they will be carried out in a physical way, it is through our minds that these things will actually be moved. See, mind moves matter. I wrote about this, and I talk about it. I talk about the book at the end, but I wrote about this in my book. It's coming out tomorrow. It'll be available on the website. Where back in 2007, a neuroscientist, Pascal Leon, he did an experiment, Rich, where he took these people, the control group of people, and told them, listen, I want you to practice playing the piano. Actually had them physically touch the piano, right? And he wanted to see what parts of the brain actually lit up when a person was practicing playing the piano. So he put them on these transcranial scans and hooked these devices up to their brain to see how their neural activity was working. And he noticed that their motor cortex would light up when he facilitated these practices. So then he got clever. He said, well, look, let me see how this works. He took another control group of people, and he told them that I want you to just imagine playing the piano. I don't even want you to physically move your hands while you're imagining. You can only move your hands in your mind's eye and your imagination. He took them, put them on these same devices, hooked them up. Lo and behold, the same regions of the brain lit up at the same rate in the motor cortex. He said, wait a minute. You mean to tell me that the same regions of this physical brain light up the same way, irregardless if you're physically playing the piano versus visualizing in your imagination playing the piano? Then he realized also that the physiology of the brain actually changed as well when the people were doing the imagining as well. So now we have to stop right there. We have to ask ourselves some very, 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 very serious questions. If these people are only imagining in their minds playing this piano, and it caused the physiology of the brain, which is matter, by the way, to change shapes, that means that your imagination can alter physical matter. How do I know this from experience? Because I'm not a theoretical priest. I actually practice this. So what we do is we've had a group over 130 days. We've been doing these techniques with mind science, and we have manifested over $500,000, $502,000 to be exact. Using these principles, testimonials for days, and we got a private group. And they'll vouch for everything that I'm saying. We've been posting the testimonials public, and we know how people is, so we tag the people's name in it, just so people don't think it's a fraud. We make sure that you know, no, it's a real person. You can go to their page and look. Because we're going to eliminate all skepticism in the work that we do. So now, when we see, you want to ask something, Rich?
No, just with that breakdown you gave, it made me think about Reverend Ike. And Reverend Ike, you know, we always bring up Reverend Ike. Reverend Ike used to say, you got to fake it till you make it. And
that's right.
When he said that at first, when I was young, I was probably about 28, I didn't really understand it. But understanding the quantum world, I understand what he was talking about. You know what I'm saying? I understand that when you imagine and you faking it to an extent, you're bringing it into matter, you're bringing it into manifestation. So I understand what he was saying about that.
That's right. That's right. So when we see these things happening, right? Because the energy inside of us is awaiting to rise. That serpent inside of us is waiting to arise to our crown so that we can be the gods and the goddesses that we truly want to be. But these things play out in the news cycle, and this is how you know it, Rich, because remember I told you linguistics is important. So when we look at all these horrific things that have happened to black people per se, right, in the news over the years, right, I want to point out something to you guys with this trend. And I've never done this before on this platform, but I'm going to do it briefly here. I already mentioned how the man who got choked out by the police name was Michael, right? This young man here in Chicago, 9-year-old, who got murdered, his full name is Tyshawn Michael Lee. We had Michael Brown in St. Louis. We had Michael Bell in the Genesis, right? I can go on and on for days with this particular phenomenon. But what's really going on is light is trying to communicate a message to specific folks down here about what particular energy needs to be invoked in order to deal with the issues that we continue to rightfully complain about and be upset about, but it has to happen on the level of imagination. I read an article today on Fox 32 Chicago. The teacher, right, the young man, Tyshawn Michael Lee, who they just buried today, the teacher said today, as they were reporting on the news, that of all the children in her class, Tyshawn had the most outstanding imagination of all the children.
Wow.
I got the link, Rich. I'm going to send it to you so you can read it. Then I saw another story, Chicago Tribune News. Out of all the relatives that they can get to ask about the situation with the father and the mother, they chose a relative named Michael Lee to talk in the story, Rich. I'm going to send that link to you so you can read it as well. But then you'll see why Michael Vick, Michael Tyson, Michael Jackson, Michael Johnson, etc., when you start to understand things from a dynamic past carnal vision, you will see what this energy actually represents. But the name has a frequency. When you're trying to convey something to the subconscious parts of your mind to cut on that light frequency in you, to cut on the warrior energy to deal with the brutality in the injustices, and you'll see it manifest in the physical world. This information that I'm sharing with you tonight, it's 2 years old. I did these presentations 2 years ago, man. But it never fails because it already shows up in the story. But when you understand quantum, you understand that this is how it's speaking back to you. Young man named Justin Lee. He's part of the group. He's hit the lottery twice since he's been participating doing these techniques, right? He's rolling down the street. We've been dealing with these techniques in imagination. A car pulls up to him on the side there, and on the license plate it reads, I imagine. And he took a picture of it. We got it. So this is how this science works. And I'm not going to get too much further in detail with this Michael thing because that's a whole other conversation that is much more serious than a dialogue right here on this platform at this particular time, because some things are really sacred. And if we're going to utilize them in order to facilitate victory, then it has to be done on a proper platform with the proper minds in order to facilitate it.
Right.
But I just want to issue that out to the people so that you know this is real.
Yeah, I got to build with you later on the Michael, because my middle name is Michael, so I got to build with you with that off the air.
Okay.
About the science of that, but yeah, man. I mean, shit, this some heavy stuff, man, with this quantum and how you saying this whole process is, and you know, I like how you explained how the satire affects the psyche. That was some real interesting stuff. Now you said you got this. Your book is coming out tomorrow.
Yeah, this is thank you, Rich, man, for the opportunity to share this with your broad audience, man. It's always a blessing and a pleasure for me to come on here and share some of the wisdom that I have, you know, with the audience, man. But, yeah, man, I got a book coming out, man. Been working really hard, man, these last 2 months, man, putting it to the grind. And the book is out tomorrow, man. You go to the website. It's theImaginationguru.com. I repeat it, theImaginationguru.com. And you go to the website, shop tab. It'll be up tomorrow. You'll be able to get it. It's an ebook. It's straight to the point, man. The name of the book is called Imagination at Work. I get into this whole phenomenon, man. I get into the mechanics, though. See, I haven't done that yet on any of these platforms because I knew a day would come where I have to put it down in writing and solidify it in some form of literature. So I put all the mechanical aspects, and just to give you a brief summary so people can get a view into what I've created, I show how the processes of the camera and photography are synonymous with the laws of manifesting, and showing you the synonymous connections between a lens and your eyeball, between the dark chamber of a camera and the subconscious mind, between the shutter of the mind and the shutter of the camera, between the developing room of a photographer and the universal substance consciousness of the universe, showing people how these things are synonymous to create phenomenon in your life, right? And then I go into some of these quantum stories. I break down some of the views from the quantum physicists and juxtapose it versus my experiences from what I've been able to create with this phenomenon, right? I get into different techniques on how to activate these principles in your own consciousness. And I give examples. I get into some of the ancient traditions and show how this is not a new thing. Quantum is a new term, but the ancestors and the ancients were very aware of this phenomenon, specifically the Ogdod in Egypt, and then the very first stanzas in the Hebrew Torah dealing with the beginning and the process of creation. Again, anytime you hear me speak about these texts, I'm not referring to any of these holy texts as secular history or actual persons. These things are actual states of consciousness that you can move in and out of if you know how to step in and out of states of awareness. So being poor is a state of awareness. Being rich is a state of awareness. Being successful, being a businessman, being all these different things are different states. So you have to really find out what state you want to step in and assume it until it hardens into fact using the power of the mind, via imagery, via feeling, via understanding how to employ sleep into your technique. So all of this is inside of the book. The name of the book is called The Imagination at Work. You can go over there tomorrow. You can download it as an ebook. It's a classic, man. This thing gonna be in the hands of millions, and I'm for sure. And it's gonna be utilized, man, to change people's lives for the better. And understand the power of the quantum is very, very real. So you can go there, man, and put your name in the newsletter, sign up, so you can stay abreast with us for some of the things we got going on. I got an online presentation November 22nd, starting at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, called The Greater and Lesser Lights. We're going to get into this phenomenon of consciousness and light, dealing with nebulas on the macro and our consciousness on the micro level as human beings. We're going to show that dynamic and how that works. So if you're interested, you can sign up for that. Also, I got a membership over there. You can hit the memberships tab, where I'm your quantum coach, man. I show you how these things work. I give people different appetizers, smaller imaginal acts to help them facilitate their larger goal, just to get the imagination prepped, get it on the treadmill, get it active, get the cardiovascular or the imagination pumping and going. So I do that. Private videos will be sent to you that only you'll be able to view. Monthly webinars, monthly conference calls. So it's very interactive, man. It's a wonderful membership. If you're interested, go over there and sign up, man. And I'm sure that you'll be able to manifest the desires in your heart utilizing the techniques, man. And make sure you go visit Hip Hop Astrology TV. My man Noble Ampool, my brother from another. He's been working real hard over there the last month, man, dropping this science on the stars, showing people the connection from the as above, so below concept, getting people acclimated with that particular level of awareness and understanding so they can move to the next plateau, which is to be able to create strictly from their mind and the power of mentalism. So get over there, man. It's for the youth. It's for everybody, really, man, that want to learn this craft and start to utilize it to make their lives better and be more aware of the circumstances that's moving and fluctuating in and out of their life, man. So visit over there, too, man. And that's pretty much it, Rich, man.
Yo, man, that's powerful, man. I wish you the best. I know you're gonna have much success with the book. As soon as I get it, y'all, I'm gonna read it and we're gonna do a show on it. We're gonna go over it and it's gonna be powerful. So I definitely recommend everybody going over there to get that. I tell the people all the time, anything I've ever acquired, I know it came from the imagination. I know it was a mental process. I know this realm we're in is the effect realm, and the causal realm is the invisible realm, man. So everything this brother's saying is 100% facts. Support the brother. And this Brother Rich, Underground Railroad Radio, and we signing out. We see you next time. Peace.
Peace.